Before you think you understand this story, I want you to ask yourself something. When was the last time someone gave you a gift you didn't question, not a glance at the price tag, not a wonder about the occasion? Just accepted it, clean and grateful, the way children do before the world teaches them otherwise. I used to be that kind of man. I'm not anymore. My name is Conrad. I'm 63 years old, and I found out my son-in-law had been listening to my life the same way you'd leave a radio on in an empty room, casually, constantly, like it didn't cost him anything. Because for a while, it didn't. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning, because that's where the real story lives. I worked 31 years for the city of Columbus, Ohio, in the Water Infrastructure Division. Not glamorous. I inspected pipes, filed maintenance reports, coordinated crews when a main burst in February and the whole neighborhood lost pressure. The kind of work nobody notices until it stops. When I retired 2 years ago, my supervisor shook my hand and said the city would miss me. She said it the way people say things they mostly mean. I cleaned out my locker, drove home on Route 40 with the windows down, and tried to remember the last time I'd had a Tuesday afternoon with nowhere to be. My wife, Laurel, had passed 4 years earlier. Breast cancer, caught late. We had 34 years together, and I'll tell you the same thing I told the grief counselor the hospital made me see. Some losses don't heal. They just become part of how you walk. Our daughter, Bria, was the good thing that stayed. She lives about 20 minutes from me in Guyana, with her husband, a man named Fletcher, and their 2 kids. Fletcher sells commercial real estate. He's the kind of man who irons his jeans and calls everyone brother the first time he meets them. I never fully warmed to him, but Bria loved him, so I kept my opinions filed away where they belonged. The Christmas before everything happened, they came over for dinner. I made the same meal I always make: oven-roasted chicken, collard greens, cornbread from the box, because Laurel was the one who made it from scratch. And I never got there. The kids were loud in the good way. Fletcher helped himself to seconds and told me 3 times what a great cook I was. After dinner, while Bribia was getting the kids into their coats, Fletcher slid a box across the table. "Early Christmas," he said, grinning, "from both of us." Inside was a smartwatch. Silver band, clean face, the kind they advertise during football games. The note said, "For staying connected. We love you, Dad." I strapped it on right there. I'm not much for gadgets, but it felt good. It felt like being seen. That was December. By March, I would be sitting in a conference room at my bank with a fraud investigator, a detective, and my daughter, watching her husband's face go the color of old dishwater. But I didn't know any of that yet. That night, I wore the watch to bed. The thing about retirement is that you start paying attention to different things. You notice the mail coming at the same time every day. You notice which neighbors leave before 7. You start to hear your own house. The furnace cycling, the refrigerator's hum, the particular creak of the 3rd stair. I'd become a man who noticed. That's why in late January something felt wrong. It started small. I had a phone call with my financial advisor, a woman I'd worked with for years named Sylvia. We talked about moving some of my retirement funds, rolling over an old 403(b) from the city into a private IRA. Just planning. The kind of conversation 2 people have who've known each other long enough to skip the formalities. 3 days later, Fletcher called me. Casual, light. "Hey, Conrad, I've been thinking. Have you looked at annuities? My guy handles a lot of retirees. Could sit down with you sometime." I said I'd think about it and got off the phone. But I sat with it. I hadn't told Fletcher I was reviewing my accounts. I hadn't told Bria either. It was the kind of thing you don't announce at the dinner table. I told myself it was coincidence. Fletcher worked in finance-adjacent circles. People talked about annuities the way they talked about the weather. I let it go. Then it happened again. I was in the car, talking out loud to myself the way I'd gotten used to since Laurel died, just narrating, filling the quiet. I was thinking about my brother out in Phoenix, about whether I should fly out to see him before summer, about whether my knees could handle the altitude. I said out loud to no one, I should really get that knee looked at before I make any plans. 1 week later, Bria called. Daddy, Fletcher mentioned you've been having knee trouble. You should see someone. We can go with you if you want. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and something cold settled in my chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just that stillness you feel when a sound in the house doesn't belong to the house. I hadn't talked to Bria about my knee. I hadn't talked to anyone about my knee except myself, alone, in the car, on a Tuesday afternoon in January. I didn't say anything to her. I said I was fine and I'd look into it, and I hung up and stood there for a long time looking at the smartwatch on my wrist. My neighbor across the street is a man named Dwight, retired Army, used to work signals and communications, the kind of background that makes a man very quiet about what he knows and very alert about everything else. We've gotten friendly over the years the way retired men do, walking at the same hour, waving from driveways, eventually sitting on the porch with coffee and not minding the silence. I walked over the next morning and told him what happened. Not everything, just the 2 incidents. The annuities call, the knee comment. Dwight didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at the watch on my wrist. When do you get that? He asked. Christmas. Bria and Fletcher. He held out his hand. I took it off and gave it to him. He turned it over, looked at the band connection points, looked at the back where the sensors sit. You pair this to your phone. Fletcher set it up for me. Christmas night. Said it was easier if he did it. Dwight set the watch on the porch railing like it was something he didn't want to hold anymore. Conrad, he said, I'd like to have someone look at this. You think? I think Fletcher set it up, he said. That's all I think right now. I drove home without the watch, left it sitting on Dwight's porch railing in the February cold. 2 days later, Dwight came back with a name. A man he knew from his Army days who now did private security consulting. The man looked at the watch for about 40 minutes in Dwight's kitchen and came out with a face that told me everything before he said a word. The watch is real, he said. Standard consumer product, but it's been paired to a secondary account you don't have access to. Whoever controls that account can pull your location data, your health metrics, and depending on your phone's Bluetooth proximity. Fragments of ambient audio when the microphone activates for voice commands. I looked at him, so if I say something out loud near my phone, if the watch is within range and a voice trigger activates, yes. It's not perfect, it's not a dedicated surveillance device, but it's enough. Enough. That word sat on me like a stone. He told me not to confront anyone. Told me to keep wearing it. Told me to keep wearing it. Keep acting normal. I thanked him and drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. I thought about 31 years of inspecting infrastructure. I thought about how the most dangerous failures are never the dramatic ones. Not the main bursting at midnight. Not the pressure spike that trips the alarm. The ones that ruin you are the slow leaks inside the walls. The ones nobody finds until the damage is already done. I went inside. I put the watch back on. I made a pot of coffee and listened to the furnace run. I'm not a man who panics. I've pulled bodies out of flooded basements. I've told a crew to stop work 30 seconds before a ceiling gave. Panic is a luxury you give up early when the job requires you to stay in your body and think. So I thought. For 3 weeks, I wore the watch every day. I went about my routines. I walked the neighborhood at 7. I drove to the library Tuesday afternoons. I talked on my phone, talked to myself in the car, talked out loud in the kitchen about nothing important. But I started listening differently. I started watching Fletcher at Sunday dinners. The way his eyes moved when I mentioned money. The way he'd changed the subject when I talked about updating my will. Once I mentioned that I was thinking about calling a trust attorney, a name Sylvia had recommended. Fletcher went very still for just a moment, then smiled and said that sounded smart. That Friday he called to recommend his own attorney. Said the guy was great with estate planning for retirees. Said he'd even offered to come to the meeting with me, just to help translate the legal language. I said I'd let him know. That night I called Dwight. It was Dwight who told me to check the filing cabinet. I have one in the study, old thing, metal, key. I keep on my key ring. Laurel set it up years ago. Birth certificates, the house deed, insurance policies, the car titles. I opened it every couple of months to add something or find something, but I never looked at what was already there. I went through it on a Saturday morning, slow, folder by folder. In the back, behind the tax returns, there was a manila envelope I didn't recognize. Plain, sealed, no label. Inside were printed documents. Clean paper, recent. Legal headers, the kind that look official before you read close enough to see their templates. The words that came off the page first: durable power of attorney. Capacity assessment. Representative payee application. There were handwritten notes in the margins. Fletcher's handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards, on the checklist he makes before family trips. Memory lapses. Confirmed multiple instances. Doctor consult needed. Can document. SS direct deposit. Redirect timeline. My Social Security direct deposit. My retirement account. The house I'd lived in for 22 years. I sat on the floor of my study for a while. Not from shock, more the way you sit down when you've been carrying something heavy and finally decide to put it down. Then I got up, photographed every page with my phone, put the envelope back exactly as I'd found it, and went to make breakfast. Monday morning, I drove to the Columbus Division of Police and asked to speak with someone about financial exploitation. The officer who came out was younger than my daughter. She listened carefully, took notes, and then said what they always say, that without evidence of an actual transaction, it was difficult to open a formal case. That it looked, for now, like a family matter. I drove back home the long way, took Broad Street all the way out, past the strip malls and the old drive-in that became a storage facility, past the church where Laurel and I got married. I needed the time. I thought about what Dwight's contact had said, about the watch, about what I was giving them every day I wore it, and then I thought about what I could give them on purpose. Here's the thing about working infrastructure for 3 decades. You learn the difference between a system failing and a system being tested. I'd spent my career learning to read the difference, so I decided to test the system. The next morning, with the watch on my wrist, I made a pot of coffee and said out loud, to the kitchen, to the empty chair where Laurel used to sit with her newspaper, I've been thinking about putting the house in a trust. Before I get any older, might call Sylvia this week. I said it the way you say things to yourself. Casual, like I just thought of it. Fletcher texted me that afternoon. Hey Conrad, did you decide on that estate attorney? Happy to reach out to my guy if you want. 2 days later, I said something different. Still to the kitchen. Still to nobody. I said I'd been having dizzy spells, that sometimes when I stood up too fast, the room tilted. I said I probably needed to get it checked. That Sunday at dinner, Priya touched my arm. Daddy, are you feeling okay? Fletcher mentioned you'd been having some balance issues. I looked at her face. My daughter's face. She genuinely didn't know. I could see it in the way she held her fork, the small worry that lived there, real and unperformed. I told her I was fine. I smiled the way you smile when you mean it and when you don't, and I couldn't tell which this was. That night in the driveway, I stayed in the car for a long time. It was the letter from the bank that moved things forward. A notice came addressed to me, asking me to confirm an upcoming appointment to discuss account restructuring and beneficiary review. I hadn't made any appointment. I sat with it at the kitchen table and read it twice. I called the bank directly. Not the number on the letter, the number on the back of my debit card. The branch manager told me that a man identifying himself as my financial representative had called on my behalf and requested information about my accounts, specifically my savings balance and the process for adding an authorized user. The man had given Fletcher's name. He had not provided written authorization. He had said he was helping me manage things. I took the letter to Dwight. Dwight called the detective he knew at the Economic Crimes Unit, a woman named Harris, not a patrol officer, an investigator. She listened to everything: the watch, the documents, the bank call, the months of behavior patterns. She said something I wrote down afterward because I wanted to remember it exactly. This is a pattern. It's not a single act. That's actually better for us. She told me not to confront Fletcher. Not yet. She told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing. I want to tell you the hardest part wasn't what Fletcher did. The hardest part was watching Bria in the middle of it, seeing her carry her husband's version of me without knowing it was his version. Watching her ask if I'd eaten. Watching her suggest, gently, that maybe I should think about having someone help with the house. Hearing in her voice his words in her mouth. I almost broke 3 times. Once on the phone when she said I'd seemed confused lately, and I had to stay very quiet on my end and breathe through it. Once at Sunday dinner when Fletcher leaned over and asked if I'd thought about having the conversation about long-term care. Just being realistic, he said. Just being a good son-in-law. And I smiled and said it was something to consider, and the green beans on my plate went cold while I sat there. And once, early in March, when I drove past the house on Hoover Road where Laurel and I had put the first offer on our current place, we were outbid, drove away disappointed, and 2 weeks later the house on Reinhardt came through, and we ended up exactly where we were supposed to be. I thought about how much of your life depends on staying in the room long enough for the next thing to happen. I stayed in the room. The week before everything came together, I did one last thing. I put the watch on, stood in the kitchen, and said out loud that I'd decided that I was going to let Fletcher take me to the bank, that it would be easier, that I was tired of fighting the paperwork alone, that I trusted him. Every word tasted like metal. Fletcher called the next morning. He said he was glad I was feeling clearer. He said he'd set up the appointment. He said Bria was relieved. I hung up and called Detective Harris. The conference room at the bank was on the 2nd floor, past the loan offices, past a bulletin board with mortgage rates and a child's drawing from some community event. The ceiling was low. The table was laminate. There was a coffee dispenser in the corner that made sounds like a machine failing. Fletcher came in first, leather portfolio under his arm, the good blazer he wears when he wants to be taken seriously. He looked surprised to see the 2 women already seated, the bank's fraud investigator, whose name was Carla Sutton, and Detective Harris. He covered it fast, extended his hand, introduced himself with that easy smile. I came in last. Fletcher's eyes went to me, then to the table, then back to the women. He sat down. He folded his hands. I appreciate everyone coming together, he said. I think we can all agree Conrad's best interests are the priority here. Carla Sutton put a folder on the table. She didn't open it right away. She thanked Fletcher for coming. She said she had a few questions about the calls made to the bank on my behalf. Fletcher explained that he was helping me navigate some things, that I'd been overwhelmed since retirement, that family steps up. Carla opened the folder. She laid out the call logs, the dates, the specific information requested. In 2 of these calls, she said, the representative identified himself as your father-in-law's authorized agent. Was that accurate at the time? Fletcher's jaw moved. We were in the process of formalizing things. Formalizing. Harris said the word once. Flat. That's when Carla placed the photographs on the table. The documents from my filing cabinet. The power of attorney templates with the handwritten notes in the margins. Fletcher looked at them and didn't say anything. These were found in Mr. Conrad's home, Carla said, in a location he didn't place them. I was trying to be organized, Fletcher said. Get ahead of things. It's responsible planning. Harris leaned forward, the notes in the margin reference redirecting his Social Security deposit, documenting memory lapses, a timeline for account access. She paused. That's not planning. That's a blueprint. The room went quiet the way rooms do when everything has been said and everyone is deciding whether to keep pretending. Then the watch came out. Harris set it on the table between us. Silver band. Clean face. This device was set up with a secondary account linked to your email, she said to Fletcher. It provided location data, health metrics, and periodic audio access for 4 months. Fletcher looked at me for the first time since I'd walked in. Really looked. Conrad. That's my father-in-law, I said. Use the right name. He swallowed. Breer wasn't in the room. We had made that decision together, Harris and I, because what was about to happen was going to change things permanently, and she deserved to hear it from me first, not in a room designed for accusations. Fletcher tried 3 more approaches. He said it was all misunderstood. He said I'd been the one to ask for help. He said Breer had been worried that this all came from a place of love. Each approach ran out of road. Carla closed her folder. Mr. Fletcher, this matter is being referred to the Economics Crimes Unit for further review. You'll want to speak to an attorney before any further communication with Mr. Conrad regarding his finances or estate. Harris stood. She said his name and gestured toward the door. He looked at me one more time on his way out, not with anger, with something that looked almost like surprise, like he genuinely hadn't thought I'd move. I sat at the table for a while after they left, drank the bad coffee, let the room settle. The watch was still on the table. I looked at it for a moment, then left it there. I called Breer from the parking lot. I told her everything, start to finish, the way you tell someone something that is going to change them, and you owe them the full weight of it. She cried. Not the crying of someone who didn't believe me. The crying of someone who didn't. Believed she didn't. She asked me why I hadn't told her sooner. I told her honestly, because I didn't know how much she already knew. I told her I believed now that she hadn't. She said she was sorry. I told her she didn't owe me that. She said she was saying it anyway. We sat on the phone without talking for a while. The parking lot was half empty. Someone's cart had gotten loose and was rolling slowly toward a pickup truck. I told her I loved her. She said she loved me. We hung up. The weeks after were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful. Quiet the way a house sounds after something has been removed from it. Different shape to the silence. I met with Sylvia and a trust attorney she recommended. We spent 2 afternoons going through everything. The house, the accounts, the retirement funds, the small savings account I've never touched that I keep because L'Oreal started it. I updated the beneficiary designations. I set up a revocable living trust. I changed passwords and account numbers and the email on my phone plan. I did all the things you do when you realize that protecting your life is not a sign of weakness. It's just maintenance. The same as anything else. Dwight came over the following Saturday. We sat on my porch the way we do, coffee going cold in the mugs. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was getting there. He said that was honest. We watched the mail truck go by. You know what the army taught me, he said, about the guys who made it through difficult things. I said I didn't. They weren't the toughest, he said. They were the ones who kept paying attention after they got comfortable. I thought about that for a while. About 31 years of checking things that looked fine from the outside. About a gift I'd accepted without question on a December night when everything felt right and nothing hurt. There's a version of my life where I never take the watch off, where 6 months later I sit in an attorney's office I didn't choose, signing documents I didn't write, in a room where everyone speaks carefully and no one meets my eyes. I know that version exists because I almost lived in it. What stopped me wasn't being smart. It wasn't being suspicious. It was one conversation in January that didn't quite fit the shape of the conversation that had come before it. One small wrongness that I didn't talk myself out of. I'm 63 years old. I have a house I paid for, a daughter I'm still talking to, a neighbor who knows which end of a circuit board to trust. I have a Tuesday afternoon free every week and nobody waiting on a report. I wear wired earbuds now. The old-fashioned kind that knot up in your pocket, that tug when you step too far from your phone. They're inconvenient. They're also just earbuds. I gave myself one last thing when all of this was done. The morning after I signed the trust documents, I drove to the cemetery on Greenlawn and sat with Laurel for a while. Just talked the way I have since she left. Told her what had happened. Told her what I'd done. I like to think she'd have found the whole thing darkly funny. The watch, the kitchen monologues, the bad bank coffee. She always said I was hard-headed. She meant it as a complaint. I've decided to take it as a compliment. When you love someone, you want to believe the gift is just a gift. I understand that. I still do. But love and caution aren't opposites. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, for the people who actually see you, is to slow down when something doesn't fit and ask the question you almost didn't ask. That's what I'll leave you with. Not fear, just attention, the kind that costs nothing and saves everything. I think about the watch sometimes. Not with anger, more the way you think about a road you almost took, one wrong turn from somewhere you couldn't have come back from easily. What Fletcher was building wasn't dramatic. That's the part that still stays with me. No shouting, no threats, no obvious villain, just a gift strapped to my wrist, just a son-in-law who called at the right moments, asked the right questions, steered conversations toward paperwork and appointments, and the gentle suggestion that maybe I needed help with things I'd been handling fine for 30 years. It was designed to look like love, and that design was the whole point. I've thought a lot about what makes a person do something like that. Not to excuse it. There's no excuse for drafting documents meant to erase another human being's right to speak for themselves. But I think about cause and effect, the long chain of choices that leads a man to plant a listening device in his father-in-law's Christmas gift, and call it planning. Somewhere in that chain, Fletcher made a decision to treat my life as a resource rather than a life. Every step that followed came from that first one, and every step I took, not confronting him early, not signing anything, not letting fear make me sloppy, those came from a decision too. The outcomes weren't luck. They were the sum of what each of us chose to do when the pressure was on. I'm not a man who talks much about character as an abstract thing. I spent my career underground, in tunnels and mechanical rooms, and character out there was simple. Either you did the work right or you didn't. Either you told the truth about what you found, or you wrote down something easier. What I know is that integrity isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do at 2 a.m. when you're sitting in your car in a parking lot, hands shaking, and you have to decide whether to blow the whole thing open or wait one more day and do it right. I waited. That took something out of me every single day. Sitting across from Fletcher at Sunday dinners, listening to him call me brother, watching him adjust his concern for me like a man adjusting a tie, and saying nothing, letting it all run. That's not passivity. That's a different kind of strength. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that costs you sleep and asks nothing back, and the mind it took. paying attention to patterns, testing what I suspected instead of reacting to it, thinking 3 moves ahead while acting like I was barely tracking one, that came from years of learning how systems fail. Nobody teaches you that in a classroom. You learn it by showing up, by taking the job seriously, by building the habit of noticing before things go wrong. Dwight noticed something I might have explained away. He didn't push. He handed the watch back and asked one honest question, and that question opened the door I needed. People like Dwight, people who tell you the truth when the truth is uncomfortable and then stand beside you while you figure out what to do with it. Those people are not small. Don't treat them like they are. I'm 63. I have a daughter. I'm still sitting across from at the dinner table, a house I worked 3 decades to keep, and a Tuesday afternoon that belongs to nobody but me. That's not nothing. That's everything. If you're listening to this and something in your life doesn't fit, a gift that arrived a little too conveniently, a conversation that found its way back to you through the wrong person, a question asked just a beat too soon, don't talk yourself out of it. You don't have to know everything to know something is wrong. You just have to be willing to look. Protect your name. Protect your documents. Protect the right to make your own decisions for as long as you are able. That right is worth more than any relationship with someone who sees it as an obstacle. I drive past the cemetery on Greenlawn sometimes, and I talk to Laurel. I told her what happened. I like to think she laughed. She always said I was hard-headed. She was right, and I'm grateful for every bit of it.